Welcome to the program. Thank you very much for listening today. My guests are Andre Mendez, Chief Information Officer and Chief Technology Officer at the Broadcasting Board of Governors, Susie Adams, the Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft Federal, and Dave Hebert, the Internal Communications Chief at the U.S. Geological Survey. Thank you very much for coming today. It's great to have all of you with us. Dave, I'm going to start with you. The concept of connected government, what's your definition at USGS? What does that mean when you talk about that internally there?
About connected government. I would say internally that the idea is that employees, that leadership, that everyone at all levels is able to communicate with each other, whether that's personally or virtually, when they need to do their job. And whether that's information exchange from leadership down to employees, whether that's employees finding ways to exchange information with each other to do their jobs. I think it's the sort of processes and the tools and the culture, the behavior, which is usually the hardest part of making sure that everyone has what they need to do their job, that they can connect with people that they need to connect with to do their job, and that, and I think this is really important, that they can connect with their leadership in a way that helps them understand why the leadership makes the decisions they do, why things are happening the way that they're happening, and that they have an opportunity to give feedback to the leadership about the way that they think those things are going. So at a high level, that's how I would describe it.
Andre, how's your concept of connected government different or the same as Dave's at BBG?
Well, obviously, a lot of what they've said resonates with what we do. We have a relatively large challenge because we operate on a global basis and across just about every time zone. So we want to make sure that everybody has access to all the information that they need, not only in order to communicate up and down their chain, but also to have access to all of the materials that they need on a constant basis. So it goes beyond personal connectivity, and it goes on to work connectivity, so that regardless of where you are in your office or not. So a creation of a completely virtual environment that allows you to function, unfortunately sometimes 24/7.
Susie, what he's talking about, I think, is the concept that we're starting to see more agencies go to, which is the idea that connected doesn't just mean the technology. The end user is really the focus on this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And both descriptions are what we typically hear when we talk to federal agencies today. And it really goes to the anytime, any device, anywhere kind of mantra, being able to work the way you want to work. It's really the new world of work. And I guess I would add one other facet to kind of the concept of connected government, which is also the citizen facing. I kind of divide it into two buckets. The information worker inside the federal government being more connected with the people and the data that they need to get access to or have contact with to do their job more efficiently, having better devices and better tools and software, which is obviously what we're very focused on at Microsoft, is making sure that our software can be available to you on any device, anytime, anywhere, on a browser, on an Android, on an iPhone, on a Windows phone, whatever the device of the day is, as they come out so fast today, but also to provide tools and better ways to communicate with citizens. And what we're finding now is that the connected citizen is also a very big piece of the connected government kind of way forward. And in reality, what we're really looking at is kind of how do we provide the fifth generation of IT, those tools and capabilities to government information workers so they can improve the experience of citizens and also the information worker themselves as we go more into a telework and new world of work kind of scenario.
Dave, you referenced the culture, and that concept is probably, as you said, the most difficult thing to drive because it's requiring your internal customers, the employees at your agency, to do things differently than they've done them before, and everybody hates change. How do you demonstrate to the internal customers that this is going to help you, this is going to be to your benefit to be connected in this way, to be able to collaborate in this way, so that they buy into it at least a little quicker than they might have ordinarily?
Sure. I think, there's this big push in government right now for customer service. Susie sort of touched on that. I think that there should be a push. I mean, I think customer service and some of the models that the private sector has done a great job of sort of perfecting or refining serve as a great sort of model for government to look at, how should we be delivering the product of government to the citizen? But if we expect our employees to deliver good customer service to citizens, then I think we've got to deliver good service to our customers internally. And that has to be demonstrated through the leadership showing that they're committed to making employees the most important asset they have. So at the U.S. Geological Survey, for example, over the past year plus, we've been working through a strategy where we're trying to get folks, and I should give a little background here. We have almost 9,000 employees, most of whom are scientists, in 400 locations across the country. And they're in very different scientific disciplines. They have different programs, different funding models. And so it's very easy for them to just focus on my work, my center, my project, and forget about the big picture. But the big picture is really, the mission of the agency is the value of all of that kind of science being brought to bear on complex issues like climate change and natural disasters and those sorts of things. To best deliver that mission, they all have to be looking at how they can work together to address those issues and then deliver useful products to the citizens. So our leadership has been pushing this concept of, or this question, how am I making the most of the survey's resources? We know through the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey and other input that our employees are very passionate about the mission, about the agency, or at least their version of the mission where they work. So we're trying to capitalize on that by saying, are you doing the most you can for this bureau, not for your part of it, but for the whole thing, and making the most of its resources? And our leadership, our acting director in particular, has demonstrated through the use of tools like blogging and town halls and an ideation tool we have that we call Idealab and a variety of other channels and methods that she really wants that connectivity. She wants that input. She knows that the we are smarter than me concept is true, especially in an agency with so many PhD scientists and other experts. That the most powerful sort of expression of our mission can only happen when people are connected that way. And it's the technology is important, but really what has to come first is the attitude that connection matters, and that it's the only way the mission can be best delivered.
Yeah, and I want to make a kind of a point of clarification. When I talk about connectivity in our conversation, that's what I'm referring to is the people-to-people connectivity rather than the technology, the wires and all that stuff. Andre, that connectivity issue, when you talk about a worldwide mission, I imagine becomes even more critical than it's ever been.
Oh, absolutely. Both for our employees because of their geographical dispersion, but more importantly for our audiences. The Broadcasting Board of Governors actually operates the widest distribution portfolio of any broadcast company in the world, going all the way from shortwave broadcasts, the legacy shortwave broadcasts, to Twitter and social media interactions, right? And so it is extremely important that we have the ability to both import content and that connectivity from our end users and the citizen journalists, for example, as important as it is to then being able to deliver it to them. So, we look at this situation as a supply chain environment, quite honestly, which is kind of unique in the broadcast environment, where we treat the ability to move content around and the ability to establish connectivity between people as our most important mission across all of our platforms. And that involves, the ability for everybody out in the field to feel like they're at home, and everybody that's at home to feel and can operate as if they're in the field. So, although, we talk about here about the connectivity on a personal level, that really is enabled by this wondrous ubiquity of connectivity for all of these different people that the technology brings to the table.
Yeah.
But for us, it really is transforming our mission almost on a constant basis because we've gone from being mostly a push environment to being a push and pull environment on a constant basis with some of our most compelling content coming from people that are interacting with us for the first time when they contribute that content.
Now, I know a little bit about broadcasting, having been in it for 29 years now, and I know that the people in our community have been interested in connectivity on whatever the tools were that were available at any given time. Yeah. Does that mean that your internal customers are more receptive to new ideas about connectivity, or does that mean that we're set in our ways, we like the way we've been doing things, and we're a little grumpy when it comes time to think about new ways of connectivity?
We run the entire spectrum. For example, our journalists on the field are so desirous of new ways of getting content, especially because sometimes they work in hostile environments where, going around with your typical journalist setup of, that multiple kilos of equipment and bulky stuff, is just not a good thing. It puts you right in the scope of some very nasty people. So they're very welcoming of technologies like mobile phones that have 13 and 41 megapixel cameras, and they can capture high definition content in a little piece of equipment where 5 years ago that would have to be done with a $100,000 camera that would weigh a substantial amount that would require a backpack and so on and so forth. So those people are very willing to adapt those new technologies, as you can imagine. Now, back in the office, and in your typical government environment, the change is a little more difficult. But I have found it absolutely remarkable that when it is introduced in the proper way, that people really take to it. And for our employee population, one of the most popular concepts is the virtual presence that is enabled, for example, by a tool like Lync. That we're running on Office 365 that allows people to telecommute now in a much more vivid way, right? They are at home. They plug in one USB cable into their Surface Pro 2 that we're deploying now, and they're in their office. And with the camera that we provide them, I can call them at home during their telecommute, and as if I walked into their office. So they are welcoming that because it brings benefits to them. And so the change aversion becomes less and less of a factor as people realize that there are advantages to this.
Susie, it strikes me that agencies are responding to two pressures when it comes to connectivity. On the personal level, they're responding to the expectations of their internal customers and their external customers. And both of our guests have talked about the citizens and what the citizens' expectations are. How much are you seeing when you go around to your customers inside government? How much are you seeing that their responses and the things that they want to know about from you are being driven by their external customers, the citizens that they interact with, and how much with the people that work for the agencies themselves?
So I would say it's probably about 50-50, actually. And it really depends on the mission of the agency. Obviously, some missions, if you go to the Department of Defense, they have a very different mission, say, than some of the civilian agencies that we deal with. But for the most part, I'd say it's 50-50. And I do think the big challenge here is having that consistent experience so that people are willing to adopt that change, because change is difficult. And the pace of change from the IT industry is at a pace that's probably never been seen before, just with the different phones and the different user interfaces that come out. Right? We release things now to the web literally monthly and weekly. So you go into your user interface for your email, and your emails change somewhat. And it is kind of that concept of change is a little frustrating depending on what age group you're in, is what we're seeing. And so one of the things that we really are trying to do as we move into this new world of communication is have a consistent user experience regardless of the device. Whether it's a phone, whether it's a tablet, whether it's a larger desktop or laptop computer, so that you have that consistent experience, so you don't have to learn a new tool as you move back and forth. And what we're seeing as people apply that both internally and externally is that they really appreciate that, right? Because now kind of we're blurring the world of work and home to a point where there's really not much difference, whether you're using Skype, for example, in our place, or Lync, right, or another tool, right? That should all have that same kind of consistent user experience to be able to communicate the way that you need to communicate to get whatever it is you're trying to get done.
Mm-hmm. Andre, expectations. How do you think that expectations will change, and what do you think will drive the changes in expectations from your end users over the next, say, year to 3 years? And how does that fit in with how you're planning to strategize to meet those expectations?
Well, I think that to a large degree, people have really started to become inured to change, because as these technologies became more part of the consumer realm, right, they were less of an imposition, for example, from an IT department. And so as they're seeing their kids adopting these technologies, as they see us, continuing to welcome them, because a lot of it was brought into our place, right? The bring your own device, which now can be connected, empowers those users to a certain degree. So I think that the expectations for them is that there's going to be a continuing set of evolution of these capabilities, and I have actually seen a sort of a dramatic shift in people's abilities to adapt to that change. In our agency, historically, it had been a kind of a slow-moving environment. And recently, by virtue of new leadership at the board level, that was very pragmatic in terms of what was happening in the media world, that had to accelerate at a very quick pace. The first, 6 months, 12 months were kind of very difficult. But after a while, people came to the realization that, the advantages that were being brought to the table were actually very good for them. So I think that their expectation now is that this change will be continual and even accelerating. So it's very interesting to see across all age groups, seeing an adaptation to the pace of change.
Dave, are you seeing that at your agency? We just have a minute or so left, but I wonder if you're seeing that also at USGS, where the receptivity to change, at least on a technological level, is changing based on people's expectations outside of work when they bring their expectations to work.
I think so. I think that again, going back to the culture and behavior thing, that what people are far more resistant to is the notion that the organization is changing in ways that they may not like. But I think we're getting to the point where people who are really really good at web or digital development, they don't take their products into a black box and let the current product kind of malinger on and then come out a year later with a whole new thing. They do evolutionary changes that one day you just wake up and it's a better product than it was. And as Andre said, people are very, I think, adaptable and getting more and more adaptable to the concept that this stuff evolves all the time, and that the expectation is that my iPhone works really well. Give me things that work as well as my iPhone. I don't want to have to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to be an expert in the technology to use the technology.
Yeah, Susie, it seems to me, just to wrap up, that seamlessness is really, if you can hit that, that's the sweet spot, right?
Absolutely. It has to work. If it doesn't work and it doesn't look the same and you don't have that consistent experience as you move between, the hours of the day, whether you're doing work or you're at home or both, which typically happens right now, especially in the Washington, D.C. area, then you're not going to be happy with that solution, and you're probably not going to adapt to that change.
Our conversation on connected government continues in just a moment on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. We'll be right back.